Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Usman Sadiq Paracha, and today we would be having our lecture number 18 of the subject Applied Quantitative Analysis and Practices. Previously, we were having a discussion on what is factor analysis, because we have already discussed before about how to test the validity of a survey or a questionnaire form which is used for conducting a survey. So, in order to check the validity and whether the questionnaire in reality really is able to measure the constructs which it is representing, in order to do that, we perform a factor analysis. Now, factor analysis is like, it's basically the identification of factors or groups which exist within a group of questions or items which are interrelated with each other and forming one group, but then they at the same time they are not interrelated to other groups which are formed from the same group of items. So we just had a brief overview of why factor analysis is needed and how to go ahead with the various steps involved in factor analysis. The other issue was related to why do we need factor analysis and how it is instrumental in basically reinforcing our findings for validity of questionnaire. Likewise, then we discussed about what are the two major types of factor analysis, among which one was exploratory factor analysis and the other was confirmatory factor analysis. So here we had an example of a model about various HR practices and their impact on the employee productivity, and within that example we just considered that in what situation the whole model testing would be done using exploratory factor analysis, and under what conditions would we be requiring confirmatory factor analysis. So then we had a brief outline of various stages involved in factor analysis, and we had discussion on the first stage. So going through the previous layout of the lecture so that we have a more clear description of what we are going to do today, we just go through the slides very briefly which were there in previous lecture. This was related to the definition of exploratory factor analysis, and we had the preliminary definition here, that how interrelationships between the variables involved are important and how they are used in exploratory factor analysis. And then basically we termed it as a summarization and data reduction technique, and then we just had an example of a few variables which you can see ranging from V1 to V9, and we just demonstrated that how groups of variables within this list are interrelated to each other and not others, and how these different groups are identified from the initial correlation matrix which is shown here, and it can be seen in this diagram which we had discussed before. And here you can see that the four variables like V3, V8, V9 and V2 have been termed as basically related to each other, but at the same time they are not related to the rest of the variables, just forming a unique group So likewise, we have other variables involved, and we can see that primarily 3 groups were identified from this example, which we discussed in the previous lecture. Then we had a brief layout of what were the various stages involved in this factor analysis, and it involves like objectives, the designing of factor analysis, what are the assumptions involved, and then what are the deriving factors, and likewise how to interpret them, then how to validate such factor analysis, and then the additional uses involved in factor analysis results. So when we went through the objectives of factor analysis, the first question was important, that whether our objective is exploratory or confirmatory. Just to have an overview, we clearly explained that if we do not know about any structure lying within the group of items within a questionnaire, then in that case we have to perform an exploratory factor analysis. Now basically this kind of set is done for the variables which have not been tested in field before, or it can also be used to test those variables or items which have been used in previous studies but in different industries context. And let's say we just want to test these questions or items in a new industry, then we may want to explore this whole group of questions again. So in that case, we again would be requiring exploratory data analysis or factor analysis in that case. Now in case we already know the structure of the items which are being tested previously and in present study, in that case then we would go for confirmatory factor analysis, and we had drawn the diagram for the exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis as well, in order to differentiate that what's the difference between them. Then in confirmatory factor analysis there are some basically discrepancies addressed which have been existing in exploratory factor analysis. For example, in let's say we are taking 4 different variables, like one is training, and the other is performance appraisal. Then third one is employee participation. So I'm just writing a brief acronym of the real word. Now let's say we have got round about 6 questions related to training and 7 for performance appraisal and 3 questions for employee participation. Now here in exploratory factor analysis, yes, we have discussed that all of these questions will be pooled up together, and there won't be any restriction for any of the questions to link themselves up to any other variable. So let's say the training question may link itself to performance appraisal if in reality data these questions are relevant to each other. Likewise, there's no such kind of restriction on any variable or question under any variable discussed here. So now in this case again we have got an additional issue in confirmatory, that all of these questions will be bound to each variable which we have defined, and the conformity factor analysis will only tell us whether this kind of model is in reality acceptable or not. And these questions related to various variables, or as we have locked them to various variables, do they really represent these variables or not? So in this case, that was the main difference in between exploratory factor analysis and confirmatory factor analysis. But one additional thing which confirmatory factor analysis addresses is that along with testing the data and the association of variables with the main construct, it also tests for the intercorrelationship between these variables, like the intercorrelationship between training and performance appraisal, then training with employee participation, then performance appraisal and employee participation. And so basically these intercorrelations between these main constructs also affect these factor analysis results. So in exploratory factor analysis, such kind of intercorrelation is not measured and not considered. So that is one flaw within exploratory factor analysis, and which confirmatory factor analysis tries to address. That's why we also have one notion in the literature that if we have to apply exploratory factor analysis in order to identify the structure within a group of questions, then it is advisable to also apply confirmatory factor analysis afterwards on the same structure which we have identified in exploratory factor analysis. So that's the main logic between experimenting on exploratory factor analysis and then applying confirmatory as well. So that kind of approach is called EFA to CFA approach. That means that we have to apply both methods at the same time. Then when we have identified our objective and we know which type of method is to be used, then we have to specify the unit of analysis. Now in unit of analysis, we have already discussed that primarily two types of unit of analysis exist. One is called R type and the second is called Q type. So in R type, basically we have already discussed that we are more focused upon the relationship between main variables irrespective of the respondents. But Q type analysis is basically used to find out the relationship and among the respondents. So it's a kind of a different kind which we will not use now because it's not within our scope. So coming to the next part was that whether we are going for data summarization and or reduction. So we can have both objectives at the same time. We can look for the summarization as well as data reduction as well. And then whether we are using factor analysis with other techniques. So these are the main basic objectives which we discussed before. And in that case, these are vital in stage 1, and based on that the very different methods or any method would be selected for commencing factor analysis, because as we will discuss ahead that there are another set of methods which exist within factor analysis which we may have to choose whether one method is more better or not. That depends upon the choice of data set which is being used. So in this case, going to the next part, we discussed about the data summarization and what is data summarization, and basically we discussed about dividing a group of items related to a main construct into further dimensions, which would be helpful to us in describing the concept in a more clear way. Then comes data reduction, that we have to derive various scores from these dimensions in order to represent these dimensions in a mathematical way. Now basically both of the processes can be required at the same time, and the first step which factor analysis does do is the data summarization part, and after that then if it is required to derive the scores to represent those dimensions, these scores are also called factor scores, then we also go ahead with that. So basically factor analysis, as you can see, is related to the data reduction, and it is achieved by having variables that highly correlate with a certain group, but at the same time they may not correlate with variables which are outside that group. So this is a very vital concept with the factor analysis, because that's the only way through which we are able to identify the groups or the dimensions of that concept. And it also helps us in performing our analysis in regression analysis in a more effective way, because the dimensions basically summarize the various items within that, and we have a more comprehensive group of dimensions, which makes it easier for us to perform further analysis. So then, as we discussed before, what are the main types of factor analysis? One is the exploratory factor analysis, which we have discussed. It is used to discover the factor structure and examine its reliability, and based on the data. So we, as the name shows, we are trying to explore the nature of data and the various patterns and structure which lie within that specific data, and in that any kind of group can emerge depending upon that how the group of variables under that construct are interrelated to each other. Then comes the confirmatory factor analysis, and it's again used to confirm an existing structure, and it's based on theory, because we are trying to test a specific theorem and want to see whether that specific pattern which has been predicted by a theory does it has any validity or not. So basically, after going through the types of factor analysis, then comes stage 2, which is again vital, how to design the factor analysis. Now basically here we are dealing with two basic decisions. So designing basically here is more related to how many number of variables would be used here, then what are the measurement properties of the variables which would be required, and the types of variables which we would be needing, and basically these different options are vital for designing the factor analysis. Then comes the sample size necessary for factor analysis, because there is a certain limit. Below that limit, again, factor analysis will not be useful, and it would not be able to generate meaningful results. So at the very initial stage, we do have to see whether factor analysis is feasible or not. So again, there are a certain number of variables which are required, and then what type of variables do we require? For example, only scale-based variables, or I would say interval ratio variables, are suitable for that, or also these variables are termed as metric type variables. So basically The type of variables then is important, whether it's nominal or categorical or not, because such type of variables are seldom used for factor analysis. Once we have decided about the designing of factor analysis, then we go to the next step. But here, while going to the next step, there are certain rules which should be considered, as we have discussed before, that these factor analysis can only apply to metric variables. And again, we do have other options like that some kind of dummy variables in the form of nominal variables, we can say, can be included, but that basically requires very specialized methods. And then here again, at least there are certain guidelines that at least we should have minimum 5 variables which can be used for factor analysis, and less than that would not be feasible for performing factor analysis. Likewise, we have certain specifications for sample size as well, and in this case one major rule of thumb is that, okay, fine, there should be minimum 50 respondents or 50 observations, but the more accurate one is that at least there should be more observations than variables. So then again, another rule is that at least there should be 10 observations per variable involved in a factor analysis. So these are the various rules, various conditions which are required at first, which should be ensured before commencing factor analysis. Without these conditions, then factor analysis will not be giving us any kind of meaningful result. So then again, we have stated here that at least there should be maximum number of observations per variable, as much as we can. Minimum are 5, and at least 10 observations per variable, as we have discussed before. So these are the various guidelines which should be basically considered while designing a factor analysis. So if these basic conditions are not met while designing a factor analysis, then we would have to abstain from applying such kind of methodology. So in this case, again, it is pretty evident that such kind of analysis like factor analysis is meant for large data sets and for quite a number of variables. So larger is the data set and larger are the number of variables involved, then the more accurate result factor analysis would be giving us in this case. So smaller is the data set, then the factor analysis usability and it's the results reported by this analysis will not be that much conclusive. So we have to see these rules of thumb that are properly applied before applying for factor analysis in this case. So after these guidelines, again we have to move towards the stage 3, which is again very important, related to the assumptions or the conditions for factor analysis. Again, these conditions or assumptions would require the information related to the 2 basic decisions which we have made based on the guidelines we just discussed. So these conditions are directly related to the basic decisions which we have done based on the design of study in terms of number of variables and measurement properties of variables and the type of variables. So without these basic decisions made, our assumptions for factor analysis cannot also be fulfilled in this case. So moving ahead with that, what are these assumptions? Let's say we have gone through the formulating of the designing of factor analysis. So in this case, what would be the conditions? One condition for that is related to multicollinearity, and multicollinearity is related to the fact that how much the variables are interrelated to each other. the more highly interrelation exists in between these variables, then the more chance of multicollinearity is there in this case. Now this multicollinearity thing is basically assessed using a tool called MSA, or it is termed as measure of sampling adequacy. Now here MSA basically is just a tool which is used to assess whether how much multicollinearity is lying in the data. Now this MSA is measured by a specific statistic which is termed as Kaiser-Meyer-Olkin statistic, or in other words, in short form, it's termed as KMO. Now basically KMO measure is used to assess the measure of sampling adequacy, and in this case its KMO specifically predicts whether the data which are likely to be the factors, are they based on correlation or are they based on partial correlation. Obviously we are more interested in correlation. The more highly correlated the variables are, then again that is satisfactory, but in case of partial correlation, then that becomes a problem, because that means that some other variable or a third variable is involved in the explanation between these various variables. So here basically KMO statistic is used to identify those variables which lack a certain level of multicollinearity. Though in some tests like regression, multicollinearity is avoided and it's not suitable. But in such kind of analysis like factor analysis, we do need multicollinearity to some extent. So KMO basically is calculated for overall intercorrelation existing among all the variables, and also it is calculated for each individual variable. Now KMO ruling is that it varies from 0 to 1, and it is calculated by taking or by in fact dividing basically the sum of squared correlations among variables with the sum of partial correlation existing among variables. So now if KMO value is near to 0, then it means that the partial correlations exist more among all these variables. But if the value is going towards 1, then that means that the square correlations exist more among all these variables, which is more basically preferred. So KMO statistic should be 0.5 or higher in order to proceed with factor analysis, and if it is not, then we have to see the individual KMO statistic values, and the one variable or item having minimum KMO statistic value will be removed, and then whole KMO would be calculated again. And again also it is important that every individual KMO, variable KMO, should also be above 0.5. So this KMO factor has been extensively used in factor analysis in this case. Then again we must ensure that simple sample factor solutions should be homogeneous, which is vital for further analysis as well. So there are some testing assumptions for factor analysis here as well, and the most important is that before performing for factor analysis, we should have certain theory which should indicate that there may be a structure or pattern which lies within the group of questions which we are trying to test. Because if there is no theory lying, SPSS is just a software. It would just try to find out relationship among a random set of data, while in reality that random set of data may not make any sense at all with each other, but SPSS, being a software, does not know about any such kind of logic. So it can basically give us structure among variables which may not be related to each other from theoretical perspective at all. So that's why it is very much advisable that before commencing for factor analysis, we should have in-depth support of the theory. Then again we have to test the whole data whether sufficient correlations exist among the variables, because one thing is vital, that we do want multicollinearity in the data, because the data can only be divided into groups once there exists a certain level of correlation among all these variables. So when we have identified that sufficient correlations exist among these variables, then we can proceed. But what is the litmus test to know that, okay, fine, sufficient correlations do exist within these variables, and that basically would gives us a signal to move ahead? In that case, you can see that there is a certain test to test such kind of assumption, and that is called Bartlett's test of severity, and its significance is less than 0.05. Now here basically this test tries to basically look out for any kind of correlationships among these variables within that data set, and if sufficient correlation exists among these variables, then this Bartlett test of severity is termed to be significant. So that is one requirement before commencing for factor analysis, because this is not an ordinary analysis. In this, unlike regression, we are looking for more intercorrelation and more basically I would say relationship between all these variables. So basically, once we have gone through this Bartlett test of severity, as this test should have a value of less than 0.05. In other words, it is stating the concept of the confidence interval which we have discussed before. So this is one test which is important and which should be considered before applying factor analysis. Then third condition here is related to another measure which is termed as measure of sampling adequacy. Basically MSA gives us a brief idea of whether each variable is suitable for performing this factor analysis, and its value should exceed 0.5 for the test and each individual variable as well. So basically the variables with values less than 0.5, they should be omitted from factor analysis one at a time, and then again this whole test should be run up again. So sampling adequacy is related to that whether the sample is enough for evaluating the factor analysis for these variables. So again there is a certain number which we have to justify here related to measure of sampling adequacy. So here once we have gone through that, then we have to move to stage 4. Now stage 4 here is related to the derivation of factors and assessing the fit of the model. Now here basically two methods are used for factor extraction. One is common analysis versus component analysis. Now both these factor extraction methods have got their own importance, but we have to see under what conditions what kind of method is suitable for our analysis, and then we have to also decide about how many number of factors we want to make within the data set. In other words, we have to decide that how many groups are suitable for this kind of data which we are using. So in order to basically see that, we have certain rules again for that too. And then again, the method which we have derived would lead to further stages in which we have to decide about how to extract these groups. Now methods we have discussed before. One method is the principal components analysis method. Second is common factor analysis method. And then these are the common used. There are other methods as well, but mostly we use these type of analysis to identify factor analysis in this case. Then comes how to rotate. We would have a discussion on the aspect of rotation in factor analysis, and we have to decide whether we go for orthogonal or oblique rotation. So the type of extraction which we have discussed related to the principal component method and the other types of factor analysis, they depend upon the type of variance which we want to carry out. Now here there is a bit of a concept here, because you see, as you can see in this diagram, that the total variance which exists in between any two types of variables or among a whole set of variables is divided upon two basically types of variance. One is a common variance. This is the variance which is shared by all the variables involved. Now here basically common variance which is shared among all these variables is of vital importance while carrying out the factor analysis, because this common variance is mostly used and determined, and that's the main common cause which we can detect to group these variables together. Then there is another type which we have discussed before, which is the specific variance. Specific variance is a variance which is, let's say, in case of two variables, it is existing between two set of variables or three variables among the whole set of, let's say, 10 variables. So this is a specific one which may be existing between limited set of variables within the whole set. That's why it's called specific. And then is error variance. The error variance is the one which is not being able to explain by any of the variables involved in our data set. So basically that's the total variance which is being basically explained, and these are the various types which basically are used. Now here the variance which has been extracted is the common variance, which is shown here in this box, and then is the other variance which is not used is the specific and error variance here in this case. So basically in principal component analysis, which we have discussed before in previous slide, this one, principal component analysis. In this case, we basically use the total variance. Principal component analysis follows the total variance. It does include the common variance and specific and error variance as well. So this is mostly the commonly used type of analysis to assess the factor analysis results. But on the other hand, we have got the component factor analysis, which is stated here. Now in common factor analysis, basically it uses the common variance only. Now common variance basically is the variance which is shared among all the variables. So here the number of factors or result may become limited, but normally the specific and error variance is, the ratio is low among and based on that there is little difference in case of common factor principal component analysis, but we have to use common factor analysis in those cases when it becomes the need of the specific theory which we are using. So in order to assess which method is to be used, we would have to see whether what kind of theoretical requirements are for our data set here. So coming to our explanation, which we can see now, this explanation of variance within the total variance is also termed as commonality, and this word would be used again and again here in further, because commonality is, in other words, the share of variance or the variance existing between these variables. So then coming to the next part, which one to use, which we have discussed before, and the criteria for selecting any of these two methods is based on the factor that what is your objective. The change in your objective would impact the selection of the method also, and in this case, let's say if we have to only detect the common variance among all these variance types, then again we would be going for common method. But if we are not very much concerned with the specific and error variance in particular, then we would go for principal component as well. So again, there are many factors involved among the objectives as well within the factor analysis, which would help us in choosing which method should be used. Then again, what prior knowledge we have about the variance in those specific variables, and how much prior common variance has been reported in those variables in previous studies. So that also plays an important role in that. Then based on this criteria, once we have chosen whether we have to choose principal component analysis or we have to choose common factor analysis, then another important question is important and which should be addressed, and that is how many groups we need to form among those group of items or questions which we have just been given. Now that is an important question, because sometimes in theory it has already been decided by the various theorists that such kind of concept, like let's say organizational commitment or employee commitment towards the organization, the group of questions which are used to explain this construct can be divided into only three main factors. Now here in this case, let's say as we have discussed that let's say in this case we are dealing with one variable called organizational commitment. So this is one construct related to the employee. Now organizational commitment, let's say, comprises of 24 questions. Now let's say these questions are also termed as items. Now here based on theory, it is stated that these 24 questions should be divided into three groups. So three different types as per theory may exist within those 24 questions. So in order to basically identify that, to test that in factor analysis, then we can give a specific number in SPSS that, okay, fine, you can only derive three factors from this data set which we are giving related to these 24 questions. So based on that theory, basically the number of factors can be given to the software, and only those certain number of groups then would be extracted. Now that's why we have basically mentioned here the important point, and it's called priori criterion. Like, what is the criteria which has been established before? So this is very important, and if basically that criteria is not available from theory, then we take the advantage of our various statistical tools. Now these statistical tools are termed as, for example, latent root criteria, then is percentage of variance here, and Scree test criterion. Now these are statistically based criteria, and they are only giving us the factor result based on the data given by the respondent. So that may not be valid at all, because as we have discussed before, that statistics alone cannot be made the basis to state any theory. So we must have some theoretical support to identify that how many factors or groups may exist within a certain data set. So without that total, wholly solely relying on statistical data to derive factors may not be advisable. Then again the debate comes on, let's say we have here stated 3 statistical tools, but then again it is very much important that which one should be taken. Normally we do look at all the results of all these 3 criteria in order to finally judge what type of factors may be existing. So it's advisable to run all these 3 methods to identify that number of factors which can be derived, because relying on only one method may lead to biasness of results. So as we have discussed that all the 3 methods are important, then coming to our first criteria, which is also called Scree test, and basically this Scree test is plotted or made by plotting of eigenvalues which are calculated for each variable, and based on these eigenvalues we basically plot them on a graph. Now here you can see a certain variable which has been, or factor which has been plotted here. So in total one thing should be considered, that no matter how many number of questions which we have in the questionnaire, let's say we have got 20 questions in the questionnaire, then ideally factor analysis will generate 20 factors or 20 groups. In other words, factor analysis is stating that maximum number of groups which can be made are 20. So each group would comprise of only one question. But then from that ideal scenario, how many factors can be withdrawn? So here we can see that first factor has been plotted, and it has got certain eigenvalue which here is above 5. Likewise we have got other factors as well, or groups, and in that case their eigenvalue has also been plotted. So here we keep on plotting that until we reach a value in which the curve basically becomes a kind of straight. So here you can see among these basically values here, among this tilt, after that the curve becomes kind of straight. So basically this point is important for us, and here we have to make a break at certain point at which there is a break. Normally it can be said that this is the point, or we can take this point as the breaking point at which we can restrict the number of factors to be taken. So here on our all, we can say that at this point, or we can take the average of these 3 points, and based on that we can decide at which point we would say the factors, total number of factors will be taken. So here let's say we can take 8 number of factors, or 9, or 10. So maximum 10 number of factors can be taken from the set of data which we have just entered in SPSS. But again, as we have discussed before, that Scree test or any test criteria cannot be wholly solely used to identify the groups which may exist in the data set. So we will go through more detail about the eigenvalue plot, and when we would be taking an example and when we would be conducting the test on that. Going ahead with that, then again we have got certain rules for these number of factors which we will discuss. So such rules basically are very much vital in determining the number of factors, and in this case the first important rule here is that although basically both of the methods which we have discussed, like component and common factor analysis, may yield similar results, but in order to have those similar results, this is kind of vital that we should have like 30 or more variables, and commonality of variance of round about more than 0.60 for most variables here. And but in case these results can differ if we have got lesser variables than 30 for that, and also we may be dealing with lesser variance in this case. So again, there are specific uses for both type of methods. First is that component analysis model is appropriate if we are only dealing with data reduction. And then again, as we discussed before, that common factor analysis of method is best used when we have specific theoretical uses for that. So based on these factors, we would discuss the other factors in next lecture. Coming to the summary, so today in this lecture we discussed about the designing of factor analysis, what are the important facts involved in that, and what are basically the important components involved in the designing of factor analysis. Then again, what would be the rules involved in designing this factor analysis. Likewise, what would be the assumptions for factor analysis, and what should be the rules involved in designing those assumptions and conditions. So we detailed these, had a detailed discussion on these conditions in factor analysis, and then afterwards how to derive those factors, what are the methods involved in deriving those factors there in detail. So once we have gone through that, then we can have a detailed discussion on rules of basically deriving those factors. Also, this should be kept in mind that when we are deriving these factors from factor analysis, sometimes the results which are reported are not giving us the structure pattern as per the theory which we are trying to test, or a pattern which is not desirable, or a pattern which is showing some kind of anomaly. So based on that, you see the expected variables which should be grouped in the form of various factors may not be obtained, and this can result due to some unexpected item within the questionnaire which is creating that anomaly. So that's why it is important when we are getting some unexpected results and some results while we are testing a theory, and the items which are grouped together do not make any sense at all or any logic at all, then we have to look for those items which can have commonalities which are less than 0.5, and then again those items of factors whose factor loadings are also very much low. So then we have to revise our initial results again, and based on that we also have to then delete those items from those whole structure which we are entering in SPSS for testing of factor analysis. So then once we have not been able to derive those factor structures which we desire, or we are observing such kind of factor structures which are quite illogical or not showing the observed phenomena, then in that case those items which have got very low commonalities and those items which are showing very low factor loadings, and also those factors which are showing factor loadings on more than one items and showing factor loadings, high factor loadings on more than one items, then in that case those need to be replaced. And when we have replaced such factor loadings or such items, then we have to rerun the whole factor analysis again, and then again we have to see that whether the groups which are derived from such analysis test, are they showing some proper observable phenomena or not. If they are showing the phenomena or the pattern which seems logical, or the pattern which is quite reasonable and conforming to the theory, then in that case that factor analysis is okayed, and then this derivation of factors is termed as satisfactory. So it should be kept in mind that it's not necessary that we will get a very accurate result from factor analysis, and that may be conforming to the theory. So based on that, you have to see whether the theoretical patterns are confirmed or not. If they are, and that is the case when we are testing a theory. But sometimes we are just trying to explore the data and we don't have theory in mind. That is specifically in case of exploratory factor analysis. So in that case, we have to see whether the groups which are being formed, do they represent any specific dimension, and are they logical in nature, or are they showing some specific pattern, or are these items randomly grouped together to form a group. So then in that case we have to manually check each item, and we have to see whether the results which are reported under each item are they conforming to that logical pattern or not. So one has to look out for these anomalies, and we can tackle them. It's not that the ideal picture is to be shown, but the correct picture and correct interpretation should be shown in this case. That is vital for the correct results to be reported in this case. So I hope this is understandable to you, and these various forms of factor analysis in the various stages which we have discussed are clear enough to you in this case. Based on these key factors, the factor analysis foundations are laid, and based on this we move ahead with the further concrete evidences of factor analysis. So thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.